So we're going to start making a nozzle for the rocket, and then we're going to put textures on it, which I've made in Photoshop, and I'll show you those as we go along. And then this is my official voice here, because before I was just showing things. So I'm going to go to poly modeling, and I have this tab on modeling, and I'm going to click the cylinder and make a cylinder. Now, with the cylinder, I like to go into the channel box here, which used to be called an outliner. And the cylinder's here, if you click on it. And you can see with the nozzle, I could probably smooth it, but maybe I want to have a few more subdivisions on the axis here. I'll just go 30 and enter, just so it's a little smoother around the outside. Now, this pizza wedge on the top, when it comes to extruding this, it has these little wedges, and I could work with it, but I like this subdivision caps to be at 0. Notice if you go to 2, it gives you these extra rings like a trunk of a tree, which you could pull out. But I like, most of the time with the cylinder, I like it flat like this. So if I take this and I go R and I make it real flat, that's the beginning top edge of the nozzle. And I can hold my mouse down on top of it and go to face and grab this, and I can hit the extrude here. I like going global, bring it down. And if you had a picture of a nozzle, you could put it on a plane behind this, but I'm just kind of faking it. And since it's a rocket I'm making up, if the nozzle flares a little more than a normal nozzle, it's okay. If it doesn't flare the same, if it's a skinny nozzle, who knows what your rocket design is. And with this, you can hit G to do the tool again. So anytime, if it's the move tool, extrude tool, smooth tool, hitting G does the tool again, clicking on this globe to make it follow the global. In this case, the global and the local are about the same because it's always going straight down, but sometimes it's not. And so if I click on this cube, it activates the center. I always wonder why I have to activate the center, but I'm making it flare out. And so I'm doing this a few times, giving it segments to make this flare out. And every time you extrude it, you need to move it down. If you leave it on top of the other one, you'll get these little dashed lines where the texture gets confused. So you always want to move it when you extrude it and make it come out a little further. So I'm just making this kind of acorn shape. And since I've done a lot of nozzles, it's working well for me. But, you know, again, you could use reference if you wanted to. And I'll pull this out and then I'll start flaring it back in just a little ways. The more little segments you do, the smoother it's going to be. Now, I could stop there and notice it could even have a straight edge at the bottom. Most nozzles seem to come out, if you look at Branson's nozzle. And who's the other guy who's in space flight now?
Musk.
Elon Musk. I thought he really missed out on his landing. He landed and then the crews come out and they're kind of dilly-dallying around and they're not, they seem like they don't know what they're doing. And it's all on TV. And they all should have had uniforms that matched the capsule. And he should have had a bus with a high school marching band that pulled up. The marching band comes out and they play America the Beautiful while they're all unloading them. And so we had something to listen to. And then they all unload and he comes out with his cowboy hat. And all the band could wear cowboy hats, which is trademark. If he would have done that, you'd be going, whoa, this is cool. But it was just kind of boring waiting for him to come out. And then he talked about how he had the oldest woman to ever go into space. And I don't know if they had the youngest person also, but it was just, he missed out. The guy's a millionaire. You can hire a marching band, you know.
Should present the idea, tell him you've got the whole thing.
Yeah, it's just, it would have been impressive, you know, and the people should have, they kind of milled around, but they should have been like, you know, military precision. They should have marched out with the thing and opened the thing up and been all, you know, four square movements, you know, like West Point when you eat like in a square and do that. And they should have all done that. And they could have practiced that and it would have been just very impressive. So here we go like that. And so this is starting to get the shape.
Spend more time.
Yeah, it's just that he's a millionaire. He could afford to have someone choreograph it, you know. I don't know if you don't want a marching band, have Rockettes there. It's a Rockettes, you know, and they could be dancing up a storm, you know, or something.
Clever.
You could have Elton. Who's the one who sings Rocket Man? Is that Elton John?
It's Elton John, yeah. That
He
would
could
be
have
great.
had
Him there with the
Elton
piano
John
real loud.
with a piano and a PA singing Rocket Man, and that would have been fine too. And you can afford it. Elton's not doing that great now. I mean, he's okay. He's having money problems. You could have paid him $500,000. He would have come and done it. So
Would have jumped on it.
yeah. So here we are. And I'm going to extrude this one more time. And I'm going to just take this one and bring it in just a little bit. That's making the lip of the nozzle. Now, if you want, you can pull it out a little bit if you want it rounded, but I think fairly flat for the edge of the nozzle. I think that cuts the flow off. It's kind of like spoilers on a car. They need to have a sharp edge to cut the flow off. I don't know, you know, the dynamics of all nozzles, but I think this is probably okay. And so I'm going to extrude one more time. I can hit G and go global, and I can bring this in. Now, if I bring it in too far, see how it's sticking through? So I could gradually, if it's coming in here, maybe make this just slightly bigger. If you go too far, you don't want to do that. And try to follow the contour of the rocket. Now, if you really wanted to see, you could go 4 and look at it. I find that hard to see. But you could follow the contour here. And if you zoom in, you can do it. If you wanted to make this an even contour, and I don't know if I think they're probably pretty even inside is my guess. But are they really? Maybe they have a thicker spot to help retain I don't know. So we can bring this up. I certainly don't need as many segments in here because I don't think I'm going to concentrate on looking inside the nozzle. But if you had an animation where you flew inside the nozzle, went down the pipes like they do through the exhaust of a car, you could certainly do that and put some more detail in here. But I think just a few of these nozzles here. And just make sure it doesn't stick out like that, because that doesn't work for 3D printing, and it also doesn't work for making it look like a real nozzle. So one more time, and I could have hit G, pull this up, and then click on the outer cube to activate the center and bring it in. And so what that did is it made this, I'm going to hit 5 to make it a solid look. It makes a pretty good looking nozzle or a cap for a gnome or something like that. So the one thing I did just to make it look a little more interesting, if you look inside, I took a cylinder and I didn't even care if I played with the segments, didn't matter. It could even be hexagonal or something if you wanted to, the hole inside the nozzle. It could be that you wanted an octagon. And I think they're probably round, but if I went here and I did 8, just to make it more interesting, and I went R and resized it, then I could, if I hit 4, you can see that it's sticking through. I'm going to hit 5. You can see it's sticking all the way through. You can select the nozzle, object mode with the right mouse, then select the hole cutter and go mesh Boolean difference. And what it did is it cut this hole all the way through. So if we ever did want to fly through this nozzle, we could. And go up all the way in. Now, with this nozzle, it looks pretty good. We could try smoothing it, but sometimes smoothing the bottom edge doesn't look good. So sometimes you go and you say smooth. And I actually think that looks really good. It messed up my hole. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to smooth it. Mesh smooth. And then I'm going to cut my hole later. So that gives me a really nice smooth looking nozzle.
Almost looks like a bit, like a drill bit, or like a,
oh yeah, for cutting a hole. If it had serrated edges here, and you could make serrated edges for it, you could definitely make it look like a bit for cutting a hole or a drill bit. And then this sticks on the hexagon. I think there's actually, they might be octagon, and some of them are hexagons that go there, but that's in hex nuts or 6. But that looks pretty good. Now, I did one other thing. I took this cylinder, and when I'm making these cylinders, I could have just made a couple of them, but if you click on here, if you make a duplicate of this, it loses all these settings. So you have to do this with the original. The subdivisions are probably fine at 20. I don't like these end caps, so I just go to 0. And I'm doing that by clicking on the name and using my middle mouse to add segments or reduce segments. You can type it in. And I'm going to hit R and just make this really small and tall. Can actually kind of turn it inside out. I'm going to go W and move it down. And what I did with it is I looked at the bottom view and I moved this. You can hit F to make it fit, or A to make them all fit, all objects. I moved it over here, put it right there. Now, if I'm going to duplicate this, I need the pivot point to be in the center. How did I move the pivot?
D.
Pivot. Doug's pivot.
Yes.
D.
D.
And we can move it over here. Now, to make it snap to the center, you have these snapping up here, right up here. There's snap to point, there's snap to grid. And so this will snap to the point, and you almost can feel it, but you're really just seeing it. If you think like you feel it, it's fooling your brain. But turn this off when you're done, because it's a pain if you don't. So here, if I go to edit, duplicate special, I can tell it, and I think my settings are still here, that I can do 35 because I really want 36. And if it's 360 degrees divided by 36, what would it be? Don't look here. The answer's here if you look.
10.
10. 36 divided, 360 divided by 36 is 10. So it's going to rotate it around X, Y. So it's doing it the Y axis. So we can see the blue one, which is Z, and the red one is X, and Y is going that way. So we're going to rotate it around the Y like an axle. And so 10, and I only need 35 because there's already one. And I apply, and it goes like that. So if I have those selected, I can actually say mesh, combine, and then I can take the nozzle and then shift and select. I'm zooming in, Alt, shift and select. See if I can shift and select. I had to go to the selection tool here. Those ups, it didn't combine them. See how it's only selecting one? So I'm going to go here and go to the right view. and to select them all, mesh, combine, and I can click on the nozzle, click on the pipes. Being a little stubborn about clicking on the pipes after you shift, and then I can go mesh Boolean difference. Now, this Boolean sometimes is stubborn. You have to go to the settings here and change them. But if it's not too complicated object, it does it. And I'm going to perspective mode with the space bar. And you can see that it cut these holes. They were a little bit on the outside, but it's still an interesting look.
Still kind of looks cool.
It looks cool, actually more visible than the others. So there you are. So I better save this. That gives me a different nozzle for a different rocket ship if I want. I'll call it NOS instead of nozzle. They actually call nitric oxide NOS when they put it on cars to kind of hyper up the speed. So it's really bad for your cylinders and can burn your engine out real easily. This, if you ever use it again, you can go edit, reset settings, and it sets it back to 0011. So any of these tools, if you go in and you go to the settings like this, settings on the this tool, which is a brush, you can go up here and you should be able to reset the tools. There should be a reset because sometimes it remembers the settings, the last person that used it. This one resize. You can come up here and go reset. Sometimes they're hidden here, but you should be able to reset your tools. Sometimes they give you problems if someone else has been playing with your computer or you did something else with it later. So we got this nozzle, it's saved. And so we're going to go into Hypershade. And I found that with the Hypershade, I'm going to minimize it here. And if it doesn't minimize, you should be able to grab the edge. Just make it a little smaller. Sometimes you want to be able to see what's going on. You can actually get the top edge and make it a little smaller. And I want to create. So if we go here, there's a lot of different settings here. The ocean shader is kind of neat. I use that on the flamingo. I didn't show you, but I made water for him to stand in. The ocean shader actually has movement and foam, and you just have to change the settings around to get the waves larger or smaller. Takes a little while playing with, but it's kind of neat. Fong is a shiny. Fong E is a little duller. Anastrophic is the metal, which is the one I used for the nozzle. But Blinn, a little less reflection. I haven't used these others as much, but Blinn, the Fongs, the Anastrophic seem to work pretty well. A ramp shader is a little complicated, but it gives you a color differential. So maybe with the flames, we could use a ramp shader so that they change from purple glow to orange to yellow towards the end. But in this case, we want this nozzle to look like metal. So I would use the Anastrophic, just double clicking. And once you do it, name it. Don't name it red, orange, blue. You might change it. It's a nozzle. Now, if you have other nozzles, it'll tell you you need to change its name. A lot of times if you use two words, you want to use an underscore, but this is a nozzle. And here I'll hit enter to enter it. Maya likes it when you hit enter. I'll go color and click on it. And if it's set up correctly, it should, when I click file, now I could make this nozzle a checkerboard or bulges on it, which might work, but we're using files for everything since I developed them in Photoshop. I actually want to do rivets. I found some pictures I took at March Air Force Base of old rivets on the side of a B-52. And I just want to scan them and put the rivets on the wings and the tail and the fuselage of this thing. I think it'll look really cool because they were kind of beat up looking. I could even use the color, which is rusty, kind of corroded aluminum. It's not rust on aluminum, it's anodized. Not anodized, oxidized. Anodized keeps it from oxidizing. It's that green paint that they put on it called zinc chromate primer. Horrible for you when you spray it. We used to spray
I didn't know
airplane.
that.
We used to spray inside of the World War II airplanes. It's this fluorescent green, and it's a zinc chromate primer, and it keeps the aluminum from anodizing and corroding. Although aluminum doesn't tend to do it as much. But nowadays, when they spray it, they wear a full bodysuit with a mask. And we used to spray it without a mask or anything in the driveway. And you'd go in and blow your nose and it'd just be bright green. And it's just horrible for you. Hopefully I haven't hurt myself too bad. But yeah, some of those things, even the oil paints, there used to be lead and cobalt, and you'd just be touching them with your hands. I could taste it in my mouth. It's like nowadays they don't touch things with your hands. And they used to teach you to sharpen your brush with your mouth. And I think Vincent van Gogh in the movie The Agony and the Ecstasy, he was sharpening his brushes with his mouth to make those strokes. And I'm sure he went insane from heavy metal poisoning, not because he was insane. So, but anyway, that's my theory. I'm sticking to it. So the color one we click on,
There.
and you go to File, lead, cobalt, titanium. Some of the yellow glazes we used in ceramics were radioactive, and you couldn't touch those unless you had, like asbestos gloves, but still probably not good for you. So, but they beautiful yellows though. Here, so I'm going to put the color on this, and we did the color that was aged, and it could be a JPEG or a Photoshop. Sometimes the JPEG, you have to load it twice, but you notice it is showing here. So I think it is working. And we could apply it now, which I'll do. If I click here to browser, it's this one. And I don't know why it doesn't show. Normally it has a default, but this anastrophic is not letting me show. Middle mouse drag applies it to the whole object. So we're seeing that there's something going on there, but unless you hit 6, you can't see the colors. 4 is wireframe, 5 is gray, 6 is the colors. Now, this isn't applied correctly. And we've talked about applying these, and they're under UVs. UVs is X and Y, but in textures, U is right and left and V is up and down. So if we go to UV and then we have this selected, which one do you think, cylindrical, planar, spherical, would work best?
Probably cylindrical.
I use the cylindrical. Spherical could work, but this isn't quite spherical. So I'll go cylindrical. And you have to have this selected object mode. Come on, object mode. So it's selected. And then I'm going to hit Q just to get rid of the tool. And I'll go UV, cylindrical. And so it gives you these handles. Now this isn't wrapped all the way around. See, the red ones can make it wrap all the way around, but I actually make it wrap less. So I got more segments. You can start to see the segments here, and you can move it up and down, but I'm going to click off of it. And if I render this, there's a couple issues. What could be wrong if I render this and it turns out all black?
There's no light in the scene.
No light in the scene. Good. So here under rendering, I can throw in an ambient light. You can see, you can actually see the textures more. That ambient light under the attributes, what percentage did I say the ambient light should be?
Is it 30.3?
30%. So it's 0.3. So you get an A on that test. And then I have a directional light. Now with the directional light, sometimes it gives you these handles to rotate it around, and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm not sure why, but I like the handle. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I'm going to click out of the attribute editor and zoom out just a little bit, Alt and then the right mouse. If you go to 7 on your keyboard, it's the light view. And you can see that the light is changing as I rotate this. And I move it around and I rotate around it. So you can actually move this to different angles. You could set up some lights in a scene and always just use that. And you can copy and paste this into a scene that always has lights. Now, when I render this, there's a default in this rendering settings, which doesn't work as well because I'm not quite used to Arnold. Arnold, the lights need to be about 10 times as much. Arnold does really great underwater scenes and fogs, and I'm not quite used to it. I think I'm going to work on Arnold more because a lot of people are using it, but I like this Maya software. And here I can do low quality just to test it out, or high quality. And here you can set up how big you want it to render. 960 by 540, 72 resolution. You can bump the resolution up if you want to make a big poster. You could go 300 dots per inch DPI or pixels per inch PPI. Printers tend to say dots per inch, and web people tend to say pixels per inch. They're really the same thing, but printers always went by dots per inch. So if you're talking to a printer, say DPI, and if you're talking to a web person, say PPI. See how I just docked this in here? I can pull it out. Just if you pull it up to the top, it docks. I don't like it docked. It just seems a little bit of a pain, but you can change those settings. And depending upon how you have this set up, we can render it. And it has some nice lighting on it. You can see the purple here. Actually, the way the light is, it's really lighting it nicely. Got lucky on that, but there's no bump. So if I go to Hypershade and I double click on nozzle, you can see if I go to attributes, which this takes a little while to get used to, it should say bump, and it doesn't. So I can come in here and scoot down to where it says bump, normal mapping, click on the checkerboard, and I want to use a file again. Now, if I wanted it bumpy and bulges everywhere, I could do that, but I want to use that file that matches the color. Clicking here on the top one, this bump depth is a little bit much. I normally go to about 0.3. Seems to work, same as the ambient. And I click here and I can find the bump. And I wanted to pick the aged color JPEG. So these bumps bump up. And if we look at it now and we render it, you can see, and you can kind of see in the light that it might be a little too bumpy. It's very aged. If this was a nozzle that was underwater and with Titanic or whatever, alien astronaut or something, it's a little bit too aged. So with this Hypershade, which I think I closed, I'll click on it and I double click on that nozzle. You can see that it has the bump here, and this setting underneath, I can lower it maybe 0.3, and then you can render it. And you can see it's a bit bumpy, but maybe it's not too much. Do you think it should be more or less?
No, I actually kind of think it's cool the more so.
Oh, you want it more?
I mean, I think it was cool while it's kind of more, it gives it more character. And also the holes in it kind of stand out.
So we could, if we wanted to, if we double click on this and go to the bump, which is in the attribute editors. Let me try it one more time. Bump. If we wanted to, we could make this 0.4 or 0.5. Let's try 5 and hit enter. And then if I render it, the lighting definitely shows this off. Now, the one other thing.
Well worn.
Yeah, well worn. And so the other one I want to do is I want to add the incandescence, which is what, I hate this when it docks. Pull it out. Incandescence here is what makes it glow. And so if I go to the file, click on the little folder, I have this glow less, but this wasn't the less one, it was the glow less copy. So let me go to glow less just to show you. And you can see it's glowing a lot, but I lost the purple, which I liked. But you do see the holes, and it does look like it's really hot. But I
could
just,
be. Could you change textures? Sorry to interrupt you, but is there an ability to change the textures while the scene's, progressing? Like say the rocket went up with the first purple texture mid-scene or something, maybe a couple frames down the line.
You can change some things about the textures. So if I double click here on the nozzle, it doesn't let you change a file as it goes along, but you could render it, change the file, and then render the next portion. So it would change gradually. You might have to do it in 4 or 5 things. You can also, as a texture, you can do a series of JPEGs that gradually change color, which you could do in After Effects, change the color and do that. But also, if you have a texture selected and you go to the attributes here, this is the nozzle texture, and see the colors here, RGB. Well,
Yeah.
if I click on one, you can say key selected, and then later on, you can change the amount of green. And when you do that, you can notice it turned a little browner. So I can change those attributes. If I click on it, I could change the amount of blue, and I could key it at certain different times. I'm using the middle mouse to scroll this. You actually kind of have to get over here to use the middle mouse. So the blue, and it's not letting me scroll. It gets stubborn, but I'll type in 256. I think that's the max. Maybe it's not. Let me try 100. Maybe it's 100 scale. And so with this texture, you're actually changing the colors. You could change the transparency, this incandescence here, green incandescence. Let me see if I can go 100. I'm not getting much change. Oh, does it look greener in the incandescence? Let's render it and see. I can't see it being greener.
I don't really notice any difference.
Yeah. Oh, it didn't take the setting. Let me go 50. Oh, you know why it's not letting me do incandescence? Because I'm using a map. But the glow intensity, let's put it up to 100%. So the whole thing is glowing.
There,
So I'll
there
put
went
this,
the whole thing right there.
I'll go 0.2 and we'll render it. Some of these you have to render to see. So you see how I got a glow on it. And so it could glow and get really hot. So with this texture that's selected, you can change that. And I think that glow intensity, roughness, matte opacity. So you can change a lot of these different intensities. Where is glow intensity? It's down here. I'm going to try 0.02 and enter and just see. That looks pretty cool, actually. Okay. So you could have those change over time because you can actually key selected, and then after so many frames you can change it, and it'll in between it, so it'll gradually change. So if you do it in 2 frames, it's going to be real quick, but if you do it in 24, it'll I like that glow, but what I didn't like was in my hyper shade, I didn't
It's really
like,
good to know, by the way.
oh yeah, you can change the colors of things. I did with Space Mouse on one scene. I made his faceplate when he was breathing get a little bit more opaque, and it looked like it was fogging up inside. And then it would go away when he was not breathing as much. So
That's clever.
kind of interesting. You can actually make people look sick if Space Mouse all of a sudden started turning more green and then he got more glossy, like it was sweaty, he would look more sick. And you could actually do that over time. And it's kind of neat to do that sort of thing. You can make eyes change color. You can do things. I liked it in The Sixth Element. Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The girl's at the desk and she's changing the color of her nails she had an electronic device, and when she clicked it, they went from green to red to blue. And she's just sitting at her desk. She's supposed to be working, but she's changing the color of her nails with this electronic device. Now you can do it in After Effects, but you can do it in Maya also. So here it is. And I didn't like the luminosity incandescence on this. So I'm going to click and just go to the file. Oh, we have the glow less there. So that should be okay. I wanted to use the copy. So it glows less and it automatically updates. So if I render it, you can see I'm still getting a little bit of the purple. And with the glow in the texture, if I click back on here and go to the texture, I bumped up the glow inside the texture here, which I don't like because it's killing my purple. So here under, let's see, Batman. So it was glow intensity. Even if it's that low, I think I'm just going to go 0 because I'm using the luminance map to make it glow. And that way I'm still getting some glow, but I get a little more of the purple, I think. So this
Yeah, you
nozzle,
can see the holes again.
yeah, and I like seeing the holes. Let's look at the inside and see what it looks like in here. It's a kind of a neat look in there. Looks even pretty shiny. It does look a little beat up or a little less quality than my dad used to work on Atlas rockets, so kind of reminds me of that. He used to work on cruise missiles. And so he passed away at work, and my brother went in and he had all these models of cruise missiles that he had made in the garage, because if he waited for General Dynamics model shop to make them, it would take months. And so if he wanted a model for a presentation, he'd come home, they'd bring the plans home and he'd make it in the garage, carve it, paint it. He'd have it done in one night. And yeah. Well, he was good at that. He published model airplanes in Model Builder magazine for 20, 30, 25 years. He'd make a model airplane every month. So, but it was interesting. He'd take the plans down and the guard would say, you can't take these home, because it would say nuclear payload. Okay. And my dad says, the Russians know how big a nuclear payload is. The French know how big a nuclear payload is. The Chinese know how big. No, it says nuclear payload. You can't take it home. So he'd go up and he'd erase nuclear payload. He'd take them down. Okay, you can take those home. And he'd take them home. But when my brother went into his office, they were going, well, you can take that model. We don't know what it is. You can take that model. We don't know what it is. You can take that model, but you can't take these models. And so my brother brought them home, and it's been 20 years. One was a stealth cruise missile, which nobody thought about back then. One was a long range cruise missile. And so it was really very interesting. And he was always going to electric boat in Washington where the submarines you put the cruise missiles on them. So interesting stuff. So
that's where all the,
and I'm very sure they're declassified now. So, or I better shut up. Anyway,
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, neither do I. I didn't say anything. So this is our nozzle, and I was going to make a flame for it, but you're really at your time limit pretty much. I better save this.
Yeah, for tonight, I think I gotta call it at the 8:30 mark.
How's everything going and how's your daughter?
She is doing great. We're gearing up for getting ready for school, and that hip surgery is coming up here in the first week of September. So
Okay.
we're just getting everything in place in the house to make sure the stay at home will be as comfortable for her as well as her mom to take care of her, kind of be prepared for that.
And how old is
But
she
her
now?
birthday's coming up. She will be 7 on
7.
the 27th.
And when she does the hip, will she do Zoom lessons or will she be okay? It's interesting with the hip surgery, you actually feel better pretty quickly, as I understand, but I don't know about her hip.
Oh, really?
Well,
I
I'm
Well, I
talking
hope
about my,
that's the case. We unfortunately didn't make that.
unfortunately,
Oh, we haven't progressed in the walking department anyway,
okay.
due to other circumstances. So we hope the impact will be minimal and we can get back to actually, progressing the right steps and getting more of the balance routine into place. So we're still working a little far behind now than we were, but
Okay. I
that's
wish
why
you,
I'm a fan of repetition.
I wish you luck on that. All right. So, and
Well,
skill.
thank you.
Okay. So we have a good nozzle. And the way you put this in with the rocket, you just copy it and paste it. It might not be to the right scale, but you can scale it down, position it. All the textures will come in. The problem with the textures when they come in and they if there's duplicate textures, they say copy of, and I don't like the copy. It should be at the end, but it's on the front, so you don't know what texture it is until you delete the word copy away.
Introducing the highly demanded, most versatile
Stop,
photo
stop,
video
stop.
light in our lives.
I don't want you to play.
The
All right, good. I'm going to say good night. Thank you very much, Joe. I think the last time for lunch, I had tacos. So
Nice. Well, I'm glad you got a good lunch. Thank you so much for the lessons,
the
Doug.
Arby chicken nuggets, when they first came out, were ginormous and they gave you 9 of them and they were so
Yeah.
good. And now they're flatter and they still give you 9, but they're just not as good. They're a little more mediocre. It's because they got you and then they bait and switch. I'm really
That's it.
kind of upset because they were like KFC kind of chicken inside, and now they're still KFC kind of chicken, but they're half as fat. Yeah. They're being a little
Panel Pro. This is
chintzy.
the camera light that can do
All right.
Cool. We'll have to
take
give that
care.
all right. Thanks, Doug.
All right.
I'll catch you next
Bye-bye.
week.
I've got to find my shut off button. There we are. Good. And I've got to find my controls. How do I get back? Okay, and I've got to end the meeting. There we are.